There is a moment somewhere between broke and comfortable that nobody photographs and nobody celebrates. It is not a round number. It does not come with a ceremony, but it is the moment your relationship with money permanently changes, and most people cross it without ever knowing it happened. They keep grinding toward the next big milestone, the 500,000, the million, the number they think will finally make them feel different.
I am Michelle Lane, but you know me from that channel as the cartoon-style character Money Mitch. Let me say one thing before we continue, and then I will not bring it up again. I have gathered all my knowledge in a book on my website. If you want it, it is there, just in the description below. That is all. Now let's continue.
And they missed the 4 smaller shifts that already happened, the ones that already rewrote their stress levels, their choices, their ability to say no to a bad boss. Today we are going to walk through exactly 5 net worth levels, not the ones finance influencers post about, the ones that actually change your life. Level 1 is the end of emergency mode. Level 2 is the moment the engine coughs to life. Level 3 is the day your money quietly hires itself. Level 4 is when work becomes a choice instead of a sentence. And level 5 is the line where time becomes the only thing you cannot buy more of. None of them requires $1 million. All of them are closer than you think. Level 1 is $15,000. Not $10,000, which is the number people usually quote, but $15,000. Here is why. The Federal Reserve has surveyed American households for years, and the data is remarkably stable. Roughly 35 to 40% of Americans say they could not cover a $400 emergency expense with cash. A flat tire, a dental bill, a broken furnace. $400. For tens of millions of people, that single $400 event triggers a cascade. It goes on a credit card. The card charges 22 or 25% interest. Next month's minimum payment is higher. The budget gets tighter. Another small emergency hits. Now there is a balance. Now there is interest piling on interest. Now the person is paying rent to a bank for an expense that happened 6 months ago. $15,000 stops that entire machine, not $10,000, because a real emergency, a transmission, a medical deductible, a month of unemployment, can easily run past $10,000. $15,000 is the number where the buffer is big enough to absorb a genuine crisis without spilling into debt. It is not wealth. It is a circuit breaker. It is the difference between a bad month being a bad month and a bad month becoming a bad year. Meet Diana. Diana is 31, an office manager in Columbus earning $52,000 a year. She is competent, responsible, and completely stuck. Her net worth hovers near zero because she cannot build a buffer. Every time she gets close, something breaks. The car, the cat, the cavity. The emergencies are not dramatic. They are boring and frequent, and each one pushes her back to zero. Diana does not have a spending problem. She has a buffer problem. She has never once held $15,000 of breathing room, so every small disaster becomes a small debt, and the small debts compound into a weight she carries everywhere without noticing. Now imagine Diana builds the buffer. The transmission still fails. The dental bill still arrives. But this time, she writes a check from savings instead of swiping a card. No new balance. No new interest. No new weight. The emergencies do not stop. Her reaction to them changes completely. That is the real gift of level 1. It does not make you wealthy. It makes you unshakable by things that used to shake you. Most people underestimate how much of their financial stress is not about how much they earn, but about whether one bad afternoon can hijack their next 3 months. Level 1 says no. One bad afternoon is one bad afternoon. That is all it gets to be. Here's the part most people get wrong about this level. They think getting to $15,000 requires a second job, a side hustle, a sacrifice they are not ready to make. The math tells a different story. Saving $400 a month gets you to $15,000 in about 3 years. $400 a month is $100 a week. $100 a week is skipping 3 lunches out and 1 streaming service. That is not deprivation. That is a trade. And the trade is 3 years of mild discipline in exchange for a lifetime of never being one flat tire away from disaster. The highest returning financial move most people will ever make is building this first buffer. No stock, no real estate, no crypto, just a savings account with $15,000 in it and a promise to yourself to never touch it unless the house is on fire. Diana built hers in 31 months. She delayed one vacation and downgraded her car lease. She did not suffer. She swapped short-term wants for long-term immunity. And the first time a $1,100 emergency landed, and she paid it without blinking, she told me she cried. Not because it was hard, because for the first time in her adult life, an emergency did not feel like a threat. It felt like an expense. There is a galaxy of difference between those two words. Level 2 is $100,000. This is the level Charlie Munger made famous when he said that the first $100,000 is the hardest money you will ever accumulate. What he did not explain, but what the math makes clear, is that this is the moment your money stops being a bucket you fill and starts being an engine you feed. Before $100,000, your savings do almost all the work. Your contributions are 90+% of the growth. The market adds a little, a few $100s here and there, but it is mostly you pushing the boulder uphill with your own hands. After $100,000, the boulder starts rolling. A 7% year on $100,000 is $7,000. That is a part-time job in a single year that you did not commute to, did not stress over, and did not trade any hours of your life to earn. The money finally got big enough to do real work. And here is the part nobody tells you about that moment. The grind does not stop, but the ratio flips. Every year you survive, your money does a little more, and you do a little less. The first $100,000 might take 8 years of saving. The second $100,000, at the same savings rate, takes closer to 5. The third takes less than 4. Each milestone arrives faster than the last, not because you got a raise, because the engine already running underneath you got bigger. Meet Marcus. Marcus is 35 and just crossed $100,000 invested for the first time. He did it the boring way: automatic deposits, index funds, no stock picking, no market timing, just 8 years of showing up. And he describes the strangest feeling. He checked his account on a Tuesday, and the balance had jumped $400 since Friday. He had added nothing. He had done nothing. The market moved, and his money earned money on its own. 8 years of grinding, and finally the machine coughed to life. Marcus did not feel rich. He felt momentum, and momentum is a more valuable feeling than wealth, because momentum makes you want to keep going. Before momentum, saving feels like carrying water uphill in a leaky bucket. After it, it feels like the water started flowing your direction. The number is not magic. The math is. And the math only rewards the people who survived the boring first stretch. Most people quit somewhere between $10,000 and $30,000 because it feels like nothing is happening. They look at the tiny growth and conclude the system is broken. They never learn that the hardest part was almost over. They walked away 1 mile from where the road turns downhill. Here is a number worth writing down. If you invest $100,000 by age 35 and add nothing else ever again, at an 8% historical average return, you arrive at age 65 with over $1 million. You did the hard part once. Then, compounding did 30 years of overtime for free. That is why Munger called this the hardest number. Not because it makes you rich, because it buys the engine that makes you rich later, and the engine only costs you patience. Level 3 is $300,000. Not $250,000, which is the milestone people usually mention, but $300,000. Here is why. At $300,000 invested, a single average market year generates roughly $21,000. For a median American earner, $21,000 is close to what they can save in a year, and for many, it is more. This is the crossover. The exact line where your money starts out-earning your own savings effort. You have quietly hired a second full-time worker whose entire job is to make you money. That worker never sleeps, never takes a sick day, never asks for a raise, and never complains about the commute. And you are paying that worker nothing. Most people cross this line without ever noticing it. One day their portfolio grows by more in a month than they contributed, and they attribute it to a good market. They do not stop and do the annual comparison. They do not realize the silent partner they hired years ago has quietly taken the lead. And that realization, the moment it lands, changes something permanent in the brain. Meet Aisha. Aisha is 41 and just crossed $300,000 invested. She sat down on a Sunday with coffee and a spreadsheet and did the math she had been avoiding. Her contributions last year were $14,400. Her portfolio growth, just from market returns, was $22,000. Her money had out-earned her, not by a little, by 50%. She stared at the numbers for a long time. She had spent her entire adult life believing her income was the engine, and her savings were the fuel, and the market was just the road. Now she realized the market had become the engine, and her job was just buying more fuel for a machine that no longer needed her as much as it used to. That shift is terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Terrifying because it means you are no longer fully in control. Liberating because the loss of control is actually a gift. You have delegated your wealth building to an automatic system that does not get tired, does not get bored, and does not need your daily supervision. Your only job now is to not interrupt it. What changes at this level is not your lifestyle. Your daily spending barely moves. You do not eat differently or sleep in a bigger bed. What changes is your patience. When your money out-earns your savings, waiting stops being painful. Time flips from your enemy to your employee. Before the crossover, every year felt like you were falling behind. After it, every year you simply exist invested moves you forward faster than the last. You do not have to do anything heroic. You just have to not interrupt the machine. That is the hardest skill at this level. Learning to leave the machine alone. It sounds easy. It is not. The urge to tinker, to optimize, to feel like you are doing something, is almost unbearable for people who built their wealth through effort. But at $300,000, doing nothing is doing something. It is the thing. It is the whole job. Aisha learned this the hard way. She tried to accelerate her progress by picking stocks. She lost $12,000 in 4 months. She went back to index funds and resolved to never touch them again. That resolution will be worth more to her retirement than any raise she ever receives. Level 4 is $600,000. This is the number that does not get talked about because it sits in the shadow of the million. But $600,000 might be the most underrated milestone on the entire map. At $600,000 invested, a conservative withdrawal rate of 4% produces $24,000 a year. That is not enough to retire, but it is enough to cover the basics. Rent on a modest apartment, groceries, utilities. The floor beneath your life is now funded by your money, not by your labor. You still need to work, but you no longer need any specific job. You can take a pay cut for a role that does not destroy your soul. You can start a business without the terror of zero income. You can walk away from a toxic workplace and take 6 months to find the right next thing. Your money has not freed you yet, but it has bought you a seat at the negotiation table with your own life. That is the shift nobody describes, because it does not photograph well. You do not look different. You do not feel rich. But you walk into rooms differently. You tolerate less nonsense. The bad manager, the unpaid weekend, the insulting counteroffer. When $600,000 sits behind you, quietly earning its own keep, desperation leaves the room, and people can feel it across the table. Meet James. James is 45, a graphic designer earning $67,000. He reached $600,000 through automatic contributions and a lifestyle that never expanded to match his raises. Last year, his company was acquired, and his new manager was, in James's words, a nightmare. Constant weekend emails, shifting deadlines, public criticism that felt more personal than professional. The old James, the one without $600,000, would have gritted his teeth and stayed, because leaving without another job lined up was financial suicide. The new James did the math. His portfolio could cover his bare expenses for at least 5 years without him touching the principal. He was not rich, but he was also not trapped. He wrote his resignation letter on a Wednesday and walked out on Friday. He took 4 months off to reset, then found a role he actually enjoys, with a slightly lower salary and a dramatically higher quality of life. The $600,000 did not buy him a yacht. It bought him the ability to say no to a person who was making his life smaller. That is what money is actually for. Not luxury. Leverage. The leverage to shape your own days. Here is the math that makes this level so powerful. A 7% return on $600,000 is $42,000 a year. If you are still working and saving, that $600,000 is adding more to your net worth annually than most people save from their paychecks. The machine is now running so fast that your job is almost secondary. If you lost your job tomorrow and could not find work for a year, the machine does not stop. It keeps compounding. It keeps earning. The catastrophe that would have destroyed you at level 1 is now an inconvenience you can absorb without touching your principal. That is the difference between being wealthy and being unbreakable. Wealth is a number. Unbreakability is a feeling. And $600,000 is roughly the line where the feeling arrives. Level 5 is $1.5 million. Not $2.5 million, which is the traditional financial independence number, but $1.5 million. Here is why the lower number matters. At $1.5 million, a 4% withdrawal rate produces $60,000 a year. $60,000 is roughly the median household income in the United States. You can now live a median life, a perfectly normal, not extravagant, not deprived, fully functional life, without ever working again. Not a rich life, a free life. And most people confuse those two things so completely that they chase the wrong one their entire careers. They aim for 10 million because they think freedom costs 10 million. It does not. Freedom costs $1.5 million, a paid-off modest home, and the willingness to live like a regular person who happens not to have a boss. The gap between $1.5 million and $10 million is mostly ego, scenery, and legacy. The freedom itself was purchased 3 commas earlier. At this level, work becomes fully optional. You might keep working. Most people at this level do. But now it is because you chose the work, not because the bills chose it for you. Every meeting you sit through calmly, because you know you could walk. Every project you take on because it interests you, not because you need the bonus. Every Monday morning that feels like a Tuesday because the threat has been removed. That is what freedom feels like before anyone is impressed by your net worth. It is quiet. It is internal. And it is available to anyone who reaches this number, which is about the top 8% of American households. Top 8% sounds exclusive, but look at the path again. $15,000 in cash, $100,000 invested, $300,000 invested, $600,000 invested, $1.5 million invested. Each level is reachable from the previous one, with the same boring tools. Automatic contributions, index funds, time, and the refusal to interrupt the machine. No genius, no luck, no hot stock tip, just showing up and not leaving. Here is what nobody tells you about these 5 levels. The levels themselves are not what change your life. What changes your life is what each level does to your psychology. Level 1 buys you the end of panic. The low-grade background anxiety of being 1 bad month away from disaster finally switches off. You did not know how much energy that anxiety was consuming until it stopped. Level 2 buys you momentum. For the first time, the graph moves faster than you expected. You start believing the system works, because you can finally see it working. Level 3 buys you the realization that you are no longer the engine. Your money is. And that realization rewires your relationship with every future paycheck. Level 4 buys you leverage. You can say no to things that used to own you. The job, the boss, the city, the arrangement you tolerated because you had no alternative. Level 5 buys you the thing everyone says they want, and almost nobody pursues correctly. Ownership of your own hours. You do not have to stop working. You just have to stop needing any particular job. That distinction is the entire game. Most people spend their whole careers chasing bigger paychecks, thinking the check is the point. It is not. The point is the number that makes the check optional. And here is the final twist that almost no one says out loud. The The most important level on this entire map is not level 5. It is level 1. Because level 1 is the only level that requires you to start. Everything after level 1 is an extension of the same habit you built getting to level 1. The same automatic transfer, the same index fund, the same refusal to panic during corrections. The person who builds $15,000 has already built the muscle they will use to reach every subsequent level. The difficulty is almost entirely front-loaded. The hardest part of the entire journey is the first 3 years when the growth is invisible, and the sacrifice is real, and the payoff feels years away. Most people never start because they have been told the whole mountain matters, when in reality, only the first step matters. The first step is $15,000, and 3 years of mild discipline. Everything after that is just time and patience, and the refusal to interrupt the machine that your first step set in motion. So let me leave you with a single number to think about. If you are 30 years old and you invest $500 a month in a total market index fund earning an average of 7%, you cross $15,000 in about 2.5 years. You cross $100,000 in about 11 years. You cross $300,000 in about 19 years. You cross $600,000 in about 26 years. You cross $1.5 million in about 35 years. That is a 65-year-old who never earned more than an average income, never picked a winning stock, never timed the market, and retired a millionaire. That person did not get lucky. They showed up, month after month, year after year, through corrections and crashes and headlines screaming that the world was ending. They kept the money in the machine. They let it compound. They interrupted nothing. And the machine did what machines do. It ran. If this mapped out something about your money you had never seen laid out so clearly before, subscribe to Desmond Wealth. We draw the map behind the numbers that actually change your life, not the numbers that get the most attention. No hustle culture, no shame, just the honest math so you can see which level you are on and which one is next. Because the first level is closer than the story in your head, and the only thing standing between you and it is the decision to start.